May I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It with Shanette and Cornell. On today, our guest will be Miss Gwen Small. She is the sister of Linwood, um, who was killed while in police custody a few years ago. Please forgive me, I'm just coming off the uh, off work, so I'm kind of getting my stuff together. But I'm happy to be with you guys on this evening. And before our conversation with me, we're going to talk about police brutality. We may talk about the Havana syndrome, and also she is the cousin of Harriet. Um, I forgot her cousin last name, but we're going to get into their story. But mainly, we're going to talk about police brutality and the effect that it's having on our community. Before we get into that, I'm gonna let my co-host Cornell come on and introduce himself. Cornell, how you doing on this evening?
Ma'am, I'm doing okay tonight, ma'am, and thank you for having me here. It's good to be here tonight on the show, and we're going to have a good show tonight. And like I say, thank you, and like I said, I appreciate this very much.
Yes. So I am so glad to be back in the studio with you on today. I know we had been having conversation about what we was going to discuss, and so here we is tonight, and we're going to talk about police brutality. Um, as we know it, I'm gonna be reading off two screens, so you may see me going back and forth. Um, Black Americans are 2.5 times likely to be shot or killed by police officers as whites or Latino people were 1.2 times as likely between 2015 and 2021. We all know the most famous case, police brutality case, is it was Rodney King back in '91, where the officers were acquitted of the beating of Mr. King, and it set off a riot in the LA area where the National Guards was called in. Um, Without further ado, I'm gonna welcome Miss Gwendolyn Smalls into Let's Talk About It, and let's just have a conversation. Welcome, Miss Smalls.
Be a part of the Aspiring Authors magazine. I would like to say that it is great. Let me put my face up here. It's great to be a part of it. I want to say that my name is Gwendolyn Small. I'm an author and a public speaker. I've been talking about my brother's case and our family for years and the Havana syndrome. And finally, I've been given a platform, a podcast such as yours, to be able to tell our story. I know you was talking about Rodney King's case, but police brutality go further back than Rodney King. I think Rodney King set off a dynamite because so many people were in disbelief at what happened to him. And then all the police officers, just like in my brother's case, they got off. in the legal system. So the legal system has been working against us since the beginning of time. And so seeing things like that on TV does not mean you're going to get justice just because you got a video. And that was the case of me and my brother's case. Just because he had a video doesn't mean that he was going to get justice and he didn't get justice. So I'm glad to be on this show to talk about police brutality, police excessive force, because that was one of the constitutional laws that we were fighting in court, which is Constitution number 14, which is him being denied his civil rights and in his federal civil rights case. So that is the platform that I have been on for years. And I'm glad you're giving me the honor to talk about it on your show.
Yeah, so I have been watching
So, I have been
watching a clip from CNN.
watching a clip from
Um,
CNN. Um,
how everything played out, and
how
I'm gonna see
everything
if I
played
can
out. And
rewind.
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
see
see
if
if
I
I
can
can rewind you that
find.
part and
So
share
then
it.
I want you to take your mind. I need you to take your mind. You're alone.
So talking about my brother's case in the video. Now, the video that CNN had was only 30 something minutes of it, but actually it's 45 minutes of it. The part that y'all don't see is the part where where he is lying on the ground and they ask to give him CPR once they take him into jail and the carpool, and he wasn't able to um, get help because they simply was passing a torch on who was going to give him CPR. So those were valuable minutes that was lost during that time that he was lying on the ground. And so, yes, if you go into YouTube and you look up Linwood Lambert, you will find out more about what really happened to him. And there's so many other different parts of the video, from the hospital to the squad car, that you can see. And they somehow put it all together to make it one long video. And that's what made it interesting to know that CNN had the best copy.
Yeah, because I seen it.
Yeah, not saying it.
Where basically they were trying to say
Where
that
basically they were trying to say that
Hold on a second, I'll hear you.
he was having a mental
he was
breakdown when
having a
they picked
mental
him up from the
breakdown
hotel.
when they
So
picked him
they
up from the
decided to take him
hotel.
to
So they decided to take him to
the hospital. He wasn't under
the
arrest
hospital. Wasn't under arrest
until he
Right, he
picked out
was
the
there.
until he picked out the window.
Yeah, so he was initially there in South Boston, Virginia, on a job. And his job in Richmond, Virginia, they were laying off people. So they asked him if he would like to go to South Boston because they knew that was his family home. That's where we grew up at, where we were raised. And he agreed to it. And he wasn't laid off, so he went down there. He was working for several months before the incident even happened. So when he one night decided to go out and do a little cocaine, which is 0.001 ounce, which is like a 4 ounce glass of wine, and he had a little alcohol in his system, which they didn't put that in the autopsy report. They only put the cocaine, which the news media made a big deal of it to try to make it seem though it was the cocaine that killed him. And he called 911 3 times. So the first time 911 came to the door, to the hotel, I mean, which is the Super 8 hotel. First time they came, they didn't get an answer on who that person was that kept calling. So they came back again a few moments later and they still didn't get an answer. So they went to the front desk and they talked to the front desk and they was like, someone keep calling us for 911 and we can't find the room. So they left and came back a third time. By the third time, they called and came back because my brother and the front desk had called 911 and they was like, he's on the first floor. So he was on the first floor the whole time. So they went, knocked on the door. He answered the door. So that he was telling them he had killed people, put them in the ceiling. There was a car or a truck outside that was watching him, and he was afraid and he was scared. They was watching him and following him. So they asked him, "Well, do you mind if we take you to the hospital for a medical evaluation?" So he said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So they handcuffed him with his hands behind his back, and they escorted him out of the Super 8 motel, which is located on Bill Tuck Highway. Who Bill Tuck once was a governor in Virginia. He also has an airport in that small town of only about, I think the last time I checked, it was close to 60,000, if not less than that. I think it was 36,000 to 60,000 people that used to live there. So he got escorted to the hospital. Then once he got to the hospital, he was in the squad car. His phone was ringing. So that was his girlfriend, Jerry, at the time, who was talking to him. And so she was calling him to make sure that he was okay, I assume, because when I spoke to her later on, she was discussing how she was the one who told us that he had died, and he was at the Super 8 motel, which we knew nothing about that prior to. So when he got escorted to the hospital, he was getting paranoid from the Havana syndrome frequency on his way up there. So once he got there, he saw the sliding glass doors, and he knew that they would open, because every sliding glass door we ever went to, you never had to pull them open besides the one in our house. That he was able to pull the sliding glass doors open, but they couldn't open. So he ran and he hit the sliding glass doors. He fell backwards, hit his head, and then they started tasing him over 20 times in front of the hospital. So then once they started tasing him, and he was begging them for his life, like George Floyd did, and he was saying, "I need to call my mama," like George Floyd did. I knew it was a much bigger picture with Havana syndrome than it was with just him having a mental issue, that the mental issue was manipulated because of the Havana syndrome and because of his actions that he had taken earlier that day before, once he had gotten off of work to relax. So once he got to the hospital, he kicked the door out the squad car, and then the police officer opened up the door. He ran out the door, ran two sliding glass doors, and then they started tasing him. And then they started telling him to roll over on his back, because he was on his stomach, roll over on your stomach. It was like, how can he do that when he's handcuffed behind his back? And then he asked him, "What are y'all trying to kill me, man? Y'all trying to kill me, man?" So he kept saying that to them, and it didn't come to a realization that possibly that could be happening. So once they realized he could roll him over on his back, then one of the officers went to the squad car and pulled out some plastic twists, and then they hog tied him with his feet, and they had him handcuffed so he couldn't move, and they had the taser prongs in his chest at the same time. So during that time, one of the officers said, "Wow, he's bleeding like a hog." So how do you know he's bleeding like a hog unless you cause the injury? Otherwise, he wouldn't be bleeding like a hog, because people who go to the hospital for a medical evaluation, they don't come out bleeding. They go in for and get medications. They stay there for about a week or two, and then they get out and they're supposed to feel better. But that's not always the case when you're dealing with a mental health institution. And that's another subject we can also talk about during this episode. So once they
You
lifted him up
um
because he couldn't get into the, yeah.
I want to jump in right quick. Um when I was watching the video, it was just like just to see them change him that many times. I would think that only one page would have did it. You know, but to stand over somebody while they're handcuffed and just constantly just sending shockwaves through his body, and then they pick him up and put him back in the squad car. You know, it was just like, wow. You know, once you really see it to the part of treated a person, it's like you
Now,
really
mind you,
see
they put him back in the squad car with the broken glass. So the broken glass was cutting his hands while he's sitting on his hands, being hogtied, as they tried to stuff him in the car. Not put him in the car, because when you get in the car, you normally put one leg first and then the other leg. But when you can't, you have to get stuffed into the car. So his hands was handcuffed, so he's on all that broken glass, cutting his hand up, and his breathing was compromised. But before all that happened, when they was trying to lift him up, the nurse came out of the hospital and asked him, "Is he for me?" So when she came out the hospital and asked, "Is he for me?" One of the officers, the male officers, I don't know which one it was, Clay or Man, both the three of the officers' name was Tiffany Bryden was the female, then you had Clay, and then you had Man. So I don't know which one was actually she was talking to, Officer Clay or Officer Man. So he said no. He's not for you. We taking him to jail because he has cocaine in his system. Not that they have busted him for cocaine. Not that they caught cocaine in the hotel, because no one said there was cocaine in the hotel. but because he said he had it in his system. So now you can go to jail just for having cocaine in your system. So once all of that happened, they put him back in the squad car with broken glass, cutting up his hands. And then, according to the special prosecutor, because we had a special prosecutor on the case, he was saying that my brother was slowly expiring in the back of the car then. But while he was standing outside with the nurse, and the nurse was asking him if he's for me, he had to pull the prongs out of my brother's chest right there with no doctor, no support from no nurse. He just pulled him right out of his chest. So when they did the autopsy on my brother, he had 3 burn marks on his chest from the prongs. Now, getting back to what you said about not tasing him so many times. Yes, all it takes is one time to tase him and he'll get under control, but he's already under control because remind you, he had handcuffed hands behind his back and he had shackles on his legs, around his ankles, zip ties. So what are you trying to get control of with the taser? All you had to do was sit him on the ground, let him rest up, and take him into the hospital. That's really all you had to do. So when we got the FBI report back, the FBI told us that after the first tase, that's electrical shocking, but the other tasings are dry tasing. So each one of them tased him. So that's 6 times he got tased at one time. 6 times. That means three, 9 times. That means three for each one. I'm assuming either there's 2 prongs in each one or 3 prongs. I don't remember exactly. I did know back then when I was really on it. But just imagine getting tased by 3 officers and then only one of them keep dry tasing you. So dry tasing you doesn't electrocute you, but it electrocutes you to a certain point that could raise his anxiety, which doesn't make sense. Like I said, with Havana syndrome, a lot of it don't make sense. But with the dry tasing, she tased him 17 times. She tried to accuse him of grabbing her gun, her taser gun. She tried to say that she tried to bite them. And the whole time you could hear him talking and answering to her. And since then, she's been charged with embezzlement. So yes, according to the FBI report, she tased him 17 out of the 20 times.
What was the outcome of your brother case? Was any officer indicted?
No, none of the officers, sorry to cut you off, none of the officers were charged with anything. Only thing that she got charged with is embezzlement, but that was years later for stealing money out of the property room. And even I'm like very suspect about that because they've had people steal money out of the property room for years.
Cornell, do you have anything?
Well, yes, ma'am. Let me make this sir. Okay. So on the legal aspect of this, this this is what they did, and this is your brother is some type of sexual assault system. This is some type of sexual assault system. So there was never
Well, I
charges
can't hear
against your
Cornell,
brother.
but I know that he said something about the legal issue. Well, I can't barely hear you, Cornell, but I know you said something about the legal issue. The legal issue is there's a 1954 case where this man named Bobby who stole a tire from the warehouse, and he was not able to get justice because they could not prove without a shadow of a doubt that he did not, they didn't do it racism. So you talking about a civil rights case, you're not talking about a criminal case. There was no criminal law brought, there was only federal law brought. The criminal law, it all depends on what the federal law does. So if the federal law brings no charges, then the case falls apart as well. So what they did was they found a law from 1954 where Bobby from Georgia was killed by a police officer just like George Floyd. He knew the police officer that killed him, but he didn't get any justice because they couldn't prove a reasonable doubt. And that's what they told me, that they couldn't prove within a reasonable doubt that they tried to kill my brother because of a civil rights issue, not because of a criminal issue. That's why the criminal charges were not brought the whole 2 years. It took us 2 years to get the video. I had to obtain attorneys who actually got us on CNN, MSNBC, Associated Press. His name is Patrick J. Murphy, and he's friends with President Obama. And he was the one that got us our attorney. So we couldn't get the video for almost 2 years. So finally, when we got the video, he had the video in his office, and he said he had it in his office for about a week. When he called me, he was shocked. He was like, "Gwen, you got to see this video." I was like, so how is it? I thought my brother only got tased one time. I didn't know he got tased 20 times. He said, it is horrific. It's something that you should see on TV. So then he called Patrick Murphy and told Patrick Murphy about it. And then Patrick Murphy called me and told me about it. And then he called me back and told me that he had called someone on CNN and did his elevator speech. And we're going to be on CNN tonight. And so from CNN, we went from MSNBC to CNN to having Ari Marburg come to our house, who is the number one person at MSNBC when it comes down to an attorney and interviewing people. So no, there was no legal justice for my brother in regards to that. There was no charges brought, from what I understand,
Well,
and I wrote in my book, which is about Gray,
Cornell,
is that they are still working.
Cornell wanted to know, were they insinuating that your brother caused his own death?
Okay, can you repeat that again?
Cornell wanted the question that
I
Cornell
can't.
wanted to know, what did they insinuate that your brother caused his own death?
Well, the cocaine was the issue with the insinuation. They didn't insinuate anything else because they can clearly see that it was a federal matter, and the federal matters trumps criminal all day because they could have federal charges as well as criminal charges. So with his case, they didn't insinuate anything other than he had cocaine in his system, and the newspaper tried to run with that in the very beginning before we even got the video. Months and months before we got the video, they were trying to insinuate that it was the cocaine. But from the autopsy report, he had 0.001 ounce, which is like a 4 ounce glass of wine, in his system. It was actually leaving his system. So he must have did it some part of the day where it was wearing off. But they didn't insinuate anything about him causing his own problem. They just said that it was the cocaine as well as the excited delirium is what they call it. And I guess that comes from the tasing.
Okay.
Okay. This is a doctor named Dr. Vincent J.M. DeMayo. He's the doctor here in the United States. He stated his theory right there, okay? And he is stating, and I just want to mostly testify that a lot of times he's going to the good, okay? But he's going to the good. Okay,
Well, I have, well, you know what, Carmel? I have done my research on excited delirium, and what I noticed is that when I contact Taser International, the first thing they said to me was that Taser is not a weapon. Taser is a weapon. It's like a gun on your belt. It could kill people. It could take people's lives. It gives them heart attacks. They try to tell me that excited delirium comes from a person that's inside their body and their brains and all this other stuff. And I was like, no, excited delirium is no such thing. So what they were saying is that it's a made up theory. It is not a fact because they don't have any documentation to prove that excited delirium is actually a condition. Excuse me. They can't prove that it's a condition. Excited delirium is just something that they made up. And Taser International don't want any confusion going on because they don't want to interrupt their millions and millions of dollars that they've been making, having all these government contracts and contracts with police departments across the country, probably across the world. And in some states, the taser is illegal, from my research.
Yeah.
Not every
So
police department has a taser.
you men- you mentioned the Havana syndrome in your was that part of it as well pertaining to your brother?
Yes. Yes, it played a major part because when I look back on all the conditions that I've been through, and with my brother, yes, it was a major part, the reason why he was delirious. One thing about the Havana syndrome is an invisible laser. You can't see it, but you can feel it. I feel it every day. Like I feel it now talking to you. Like when you hear my speech is a little compromised because it's doing something to my tongue as I'm talking. So the Vanna syndrome, from what I looked up with the FCC filing by David Morrison, is that it compromises your bloodstream, it compromises your immune system, it compromises your frontal lobe, which is this part of your brain, which is your cognitive thinking, your emotions, whether you're going to be gay, lesbian, or whether you like white men, white women, black women, what you like food, what you craving. It affects you having a stroke. It affects you having a heart attack. It affects you being a pedophile. It can affect you to be a rapist. It can affect you to being a killer or a murderer, like it has been doing in our community for years. That's what it's been used for. So if you go to any Martin Luther King Boulevard or Avenue, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And if you go to any neighborhood that's been once black and then is regentrified, you'll know what I'm talking about. So what they're trying to do is make sure that we don't have another Black Wall Street or another Tulsa, Oklahoma in our community. But to me, in the realization, that's getting to be a little bit too late because people are becoming aware of this Havana syndrome. Now, what is Havana syndrome? Havana syndrome is a microwave frequency. It's invisible. And Lester Holt did a documentary twice on his TV show.
Yeah.
They called the Havana syndrome of the invisible voice, meaning that the voice can mimic you, it can mimic God, and you could think you're talking to God when you're talking to yourself, but actually you're talking to someone who actually refined the frequency like they've done to me and caused the cricket sounds in my ears constantly. And when President Obama went to Cuba in 2016, that's when he called it the Havana syndrome. And my brother died in 2013, and that's when me and Patrick Murphy, who was one of his best friends, has been talking. So only to assume that they have been talking about this frequency that's on me for a while, that's my assumption. Because it wouldn't make sense that Biden was signed into law in 2021 that Havana syndrome does exist, but only for military people. Well, I was born out there in Northern Virginia where the military forces are and all the intelligence agencies. I was born out there. I was raised out there, as well as it happened to me as a little girl because they're trying to steal our land. On top of the fact they trying to steal our land and put solar panels up. That's why my brother died. They kind of like coded around that before he died, and I didn't believe it, but now I believe it because he's dead. And they coded around that by telling me that with the frequency as though it was God. And I was praying that it wasn't true, and then eventually it came true. That's why I fight so hard the way that I fight because I know what I'm saying is true. And I'm glad that Biden signed it into law to make it true too.
So the
So with the Havana syndrome, yeah. So with the Havana syndrome, it takes a part of your brain and it manipulates it.
the Havana syndrome and police brutality is not the only thing that your family went through. You also had a cousin, Harriet. I forgot her last name. That they took DNA from, and that's how. Can you hear me?
No, I can't.
You can't. No, I was saying that that's not the only thing that happened to your family. It started back even with it goes back as far as with your cousin Harriet.
Yes, it goes back many years. It goes back to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X years. It goes way back than that. Because I was born in '68. So it goes back years. They had been experimenting on me since I was a little girl. And I remember as a little girl hearing the voice in my head, thinking it was God, telling me that you're going to work for the government. I had no idea that once I turned 34 years old, that they would see, you could hear me talking now. And I like to point it out so people can hear me. Um, when I was a little girl, they told me I was going to work for the government. And then all of a sudden, now here I am being used by the government to do these things to
Mm-mm.
me. Not only that, pedophilia, they try to use that. They try to make me gay by looking at women, cracking my eyes till they hurt, till they so hurt so much that I had to post it on Facebook because I said people are not going to believe this. So some people who are gay are not supposed to be gay. And some people who are murderers not supposed to be murderers, and that's why they experiment on us in jail because they can cause that to happen. Because if it wasn't for black people, according to the NIH, the CDC, the FDA, none of those departments would be existing. So they need to work. They need to experiment on black bodies without our permission or consent or knowledge. Because they
Yeah,
doing
they've been
this without my
experimenting
knowledge,
on
and they
us
did
for
this.
years.
for years, especially in this jail system because you can't go anywhere. You have to give blood. And that's what happened with my brother Ray when he was sent to jail. He was sent to jail because he had his three strikes and you're out, which ironically is like the stepson. Patrick J. Murphy to me is like a godchild to the Clintons because he met them when he was in college and they made the law three strikes you out. So Ray was affected by that. So he had to go to jail because his third strike was being accessory to a robbery of stealing a TV out of Big Lots. And the two white boys, one father was a sheriff, and the other one, I don't know what he did, but they didn't go to jail. Ray had to do 14 years, but his 14 years was included because he had to stab somebody with a fork because they wanted to have sex with him while he was in jail. But when he got out of jail, he told well prison. When he got out of prison, he told me that he still had 26 years over his head if he screwed up his parole. So they was really after him because number one, he has O blood. Number two, he's related to Henrietta Lacks. And number three, he is heir to land in the country that they want to put solar panels up with. So that's already three strikes against the companies, the government that's doing this to my family. And I'm the
Wow.
only one that's getting on TV and podcasts and talking about it because everyone else, like the FBI and the CIA and the military personnel people, they get on there and all they talk about is how they feel vertigo, how they feel the cricking and the buzzing in their heads, and how it affects them emotionally, making them feel sad. They know they have left me the way that I am because I've been this way with this thing on my head for 23 years like this. Before it was just on my head would burn, it would itch, my hair would fall out. I never made a big deal of it. But it wasn't until 2002, excuse me, just a Havana, 2002, that it started showing up with the way that I talk, with the frequency constantly buzzing my ears, with my head constantly rocking back and forth sometimes when I'm by myself,
Wow.
and
And
my
did you
tongue being stuck to the top of my mouth when I talk. I can't hear you say that again.
I said they don't have a cure for the Havana syndrome?
From what I was told by a nuclear physicist, the only cure that they have for that is whoever is doing it to cut the shit out, to stop doing it. You have to be sitting next to that person that's pressing the buttons, he said. That's the only cure for it, is that they have to turn it off and stop it. That's why I keep saying that on Facebook, just turn it off. Because they have turned it off before when years ago, about 20 years ago, it was turned off for only a few moments and then it got turned back on. It's like the crooked sounds and everything just went away and I was like, oh, this is great. I believe the voices in my head was God. But then when it came back on, I believe the voice wasn't God anymore because they weren't doing things morally. They was doing things against my integrity. They was doing things against my moral standards, everything that a person wouldn't do, and they was violating all the Ten Commandments. So I was like, no, something's not right about this thing on my head. This is not for the better. Although it told me that it was for the better, it was not for the better. Especially when you have me looking at women when I'm married, and it disrupts the families. And that's what I tell people in my second book, Hidden in Plain Sight. It destroys your family. It starts arguments. People want to sell their land. People want to sell their property. People don't want to be together. And when people say only black people do that, then I know they use the same frequency they use in Afghanistan in 2010 when they were trying to keep the crowd together in 2010. I read that. So what Lester Hall is saying is true. What Patrick's saying is true. Patrick is his name too, ironically. The nuclear physicist who was a retired Marine who told me that. That the only way you can get them to turn that off is that you got to, excuse me, this is Havana syndrome, that you have to be sitting next to them. So there's no cure, no such thing. It's a matter of turning it off. It's almost like radio static. There's no cure for radio static.
I heard that Russia. I was looking at some documentaries on the Havana syndrome, and they were saying that Russia had something to do with it. That Putin had something to do with it.
Well, I look at it like this. This thing has been going on since the 90s that I saw in Lester Hall's documentary from the National Security Agency. The same people that's been researching black people and Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King for years, the National Security Agencies. Russia was the ones they has been trying to spy on, so they've been trying to use the frequency for military personnel to be able to handle it so that they can communicate without using the telephone because of tapping. They want to do mental telepathy instead of, yeah. So Russia has always been a part of it because they've always trying to get into the Russian Empire. So now Russia's using it too. So the next world war they claim is going to be the mental telepathy. You don't even have to tell somebody that a bomb is there. They could send people in there to put the bomb together and send you in there to ignite it, and you can get through security without no problem. Because that's what happened when they wanted to use me to assassinate President Obama and Michelle when I was in the inauguration in 2013, right before Ray died. I was sitting there on the bench, and this is just some of the story. This is not everything in detail. And this police officer came up to me and the girl that was sitting next to me because we were chosen as super volunteers, and we were on the benches because we were giving out hot pads to the Supreme Court justice family and other politicians. And when she came up to me, my anxiety started to go up like Ray's did when he was kicked out the squad car. My anxiety went up, and then they kept saying, grab the gun. So every time I looked at her gun, I kept saying, they trying to remind me of the time that they had used me as a weapon to try to kill my son. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, so I have to move. So I had to move up to a higher bench to get away from the female officer with the gun, just in case I try to grab it, and just in case they trip my mind, like they have been, to forget all of that and try to shoot the Obamas, knowing that I couldn't because if the gun was on safety, then I would have gotten locked up, and then I would have made the news, and then that would have been the end of our land, the healer cancer cells with me knowing that that's my family, as well as what happened to Ray, what really happened to Ray, and why it happened to Ray, and telling my story.
Wow, that's
And they also used it on my son and my daughter, using it on my son to be in a car accident. So they can buzz your head while you're driving, and you could be in a car accident. And that's what happened to my son, because they told me that too in the frequency. Yes.
Cornell has a question.
I know that for a fact with the Havana syndrome. That I know for a fact. If you're asking me that, I know that 100% for a fact. Say, say that again. Because what it does to me, I don't know about everybody else, but I can tell Havana syndrome on different people when I do see them. How you control it is that it gives you scenarios in your head. So it gives you a scenario, like I say, go out and shoot the Obamas, and it's like shoot the Obamas, and then I look around and I see all these people and I see all these police officers, and the next thought I would have, I could go to jail, or I could really kill the Obamas, or I could miss the Obamas and shoot somebody across from them. You understand what I'm saying? So it gives you all these scenarios to choose from so that you think that it's not playing head games with you, that you're thinking for yourself. That's how it can convince you to do some of the things that you do. Yes. So it gives you scenarios that you can choose from. So you can choose to go home and argue with your wife, or you can choose to go home and sit on the couch. I'm sorry. But see, that's why I tell people to have a right. So that's why I try to tell people to have a strong moral standard in who you are. You know what you don't do. You know what you don't tolerate. You know what the consequences are. Then think about that and try to push back the narrative or push back the God or the devil. People are always saying that that's the devil. If the devil is in you, then something's wrong already from the beginning. The devil shouldn't be in you telling you what to do. So that's the frequency that's constantly trying to manipulate our neighborhood. Like somebody say, how come it's only black women is on the poles? How come you don't see white women and Asian women and Spanish women dancing on the poles in their music videos and things like that? Because they're still trying to find a way since slavery has been abolished to tear down the black community. So they gotta have us look like that in front of people. I can't hear your question, but I want to say that not everybody is affected by it. When I was watching the late night news, one of the secretaries from the Department, excuse me, this is Havana, Department of Defense, got on and said that some people can have Havana syndrome really good, and you could be a Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett, or you can have Havana really bad and you can die because they were killing white people before. They were killing white people before they was experimenting on everybody else, or they was experimenting on everybody else, killing white people, trying to get into the heads of Russian military people and influence them. So that's what was said. He said that on national TV. And if you go on YouTube, you might can find the video because the video is also there also. And he actually said that. I said, oh, so he can say that they are grooming. It's called grooming. And that's what's in my next book, grooming. Because being related to Miss Henrietta Lacks has taught me a lot. Like I'm born January 15, 1968, which is the same day as my cousin Ron, mother, and the same name. We got the same name, Babette. And I don't know her. I'm not related to her. I'm related to her husband, Lawrence Lax. And when I lived in the Bronx, I lived in 10451. So they've been tracking me with my telephone number because the last four digits of my telephone number is 0451. And that is the same day that Miss Henrietta Lacks died in the same month, which is October 4th, 1951. So it's called coding, symbolizing everything that Elon Musk talked about. They've been doing it to the Lax family, so I guess they assume that experimenting on her and finding a HeLa cancer cell, that they can also experiment on her family to code around us to keep us from helping out the HBCUs and the black community because they started suing pharmaceutical companies already. They're already on their second case. Yes, they're already on their second case. I could barely hear you. I don't know exactly what you say, but I am an individual that has been suffering from this for a very long time. And that's why I wrote my second book called Hidden in Plain Sight, because they hid me in plain sight. When people used to look at me, they'd be like, you don't look like you got the frequency on you. By the way I look, by the way I dress, by the way I was talking during that time. But now you can hear my tongue being stuck to the top of my mouth a little bit, and and I stutter some of my words because I'm talking faster than the frequency trying to slow me down. Right, there's nothing I'm making up, and I'm glad you. Yeah, I'm glad you say that because if Biden didn't sign it into law and President Obama didn't call it Havana syndrome, then people thought I was making it up. They thought I was crazy. They had me on mental health medications. I blew up from, excuse me, from 130 to almost 205 pounds, 208 pounds, and I'm only 5'3" and a half. I'm only 5'3". So just imagine being a linebacker as that my father didn't even recognize me one day he had came home. So yes, I'm glad you said that it's real because I'm telling the things that the CIA and the FBI agents on the news didn't tell. because I have a podcast which gives me more time and I can be in more detail because no one helped me. When they signed it into law, they signed it into law to give them $600,000 plus mental health help. They didn't do that for me. Mental health therapy, I'm trying to say. I guess I'm just a little ahead of the frequency. And so I didn't get any help. So I am at free will to tell everybody everything from when they raped me with it to the time they try to have me do pedophilia and do something unthinkable to my son who was a baby, to how they disrupt my marriage and had me coded around HBCUs, how they've been tracking me with my telephone number in the place in the Bronx where I live, the same coding around Henrietta Lacks, and how I have the same name and same birthday as my cousin Ron's mom, who that is his grandmother, but I'm related to his father. And then the list goes on. It goes on how they try to kill my son by buzzing his head while he was driving, and then he had the nerve to tell me that we was too famous because of my brother Ray. Almost like they killing people as sacrifices in order to keep us from having another Martin Luther King, another Malcolm X, anybody else. That's why we don't have anybody but the Oprahs and Michael Jordans of the world. Yes, because they got people. Yes, because they knew that I was going to write a book. Right, because Patrick J. Murphy is best friend with President Obama. And he was the one that got us our attorneys for Ray. That's how we wound up on CNN, Associated Press, MSNBC, all the local channels, all the local newspapers. We was in the newspaper almost every week, it seemed like, in the country. So they had to do something about it because I was going to come out and write a book. And when I started showing the effects of the Havana syndrome or this frequency, called infrasound magnetic waves is really what it's called by DARPA, which is spelled DAPRA. When I start sounding like that, they got to have an answer because they're in the middle of it. They're in the middle of it because 2013 when Ray died, right? So 2013 when Ray died, they went to, they did their strategy. He was Secretary of the Army. Obama, I can't even talk. Obama appointed him Secretary of the Army. So when he was Secretary of the Army, I went to the Pentagon and I was sexually assaulted at the Pentagon while I was there. So my thing is, all the people that they raped me with was coded around HBCUs, the NAACP, and our civil rights law. Because even though my husband was born in 1964, we had a major civil rights law in 1964. And not only that, they sent her cancer cells to the moon in 1964. So my husband was born October 31st, 1964. Henrietta Lacks died October. She was 31 years old, and they sent her cancer cells into space in 64. So they raped me with my own husband. They raped me. That's why I'm so glad to give Angela a big thank you and a big hug for giving me this platform so that I can start spreading it to our people. Because that's why I was writing my book in the beginning, Hidden in Plain Sight, because I wanted people to see that. Because I could walk out here looking beautiful. People are like, oh, I like your shoes. Oh, I like your dress. Oh, I love your hair. You are so beautiful. Oh, I love your eyes. But yet they didn't know I had this thing on me because I was always a high and by. And also, I'm glad you said that I made it real because I'm telling parts that they don't say to you on the news. I don't say so they don't tell you all what like I said because went to Cuba and they strategized around my brother's case and they called it Havana syndrome and then Biden signed into law put them in the middle of the heat also. They can't get away without knowing all those things that they did to me and coding me around and having my own husband rape me and let me live with it this long unless they want me to come out and tell my story and tell my story to the world, knowing that we already been in the world and been around. Yes, they do. Yeah. Yes. And that's why I'm coming out and telling my story. That's why I'm coming out and telling my story because now we know why we have liquor stores on every corner. Now we know why they put the drugs in our community. We know why they put the guns in our community because they're trying to keep us from being higher than Oprah and Michael Jordan. They're trying to keep us from being higher than the next Denzel Washington or Tyler Perry. They want to control who we see as icons and who we see as people that we should have our children to look after and mentored by. See, that's why. Yeah, that's why I said it's best for me to write my book and write everything down and then type everything out instead of trying to type everything out because I know that they would try to block my mind and try to block me from knowing some of the things that I should tell. So I basically wrote it out. It's a series. It's going to be a series of books of different things that happened to me in deep detail. And me being raped down to what they try to use me as pedophilia back in my 20s. Anything to try to lock me up. Because if you think about it, if I, a relative of Henrietta Lacks, shot President Obama, right, went to jail, then I wouldn't be able to tell my story or tell my cousin Ron Lack that they got it on him too. Because when I was hanging out with him in Baltimore, I could tell by the way he was talking, he was sounding like me. And I was like, something's up. So I got over 100 cops on my Facebook page. And I would write to them and tell them this is what's going on in my daily dialogue to let them know that this is illegal. And whoever's doing this is doing it wrong. Yeah, so I got like over 100 cops on my Facebook page because I used to work for the 3-2 precinct back in the days for 10 years, almost 10 years, 8 years actually, doing paperwork.
Well, I just want to jump in. I've been on a little process here. We got 7 minutes left.
You know what? It's very unique. I have information on that because I put it in my book. So that's what my editor was asking me yesterday about the documents because she might have to type up the documents. Yes, go to FCC filing by David Morrison for September 21st through September 22nd. That's David Morrison. You'll talk about Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler used to be, I think, ahead of either the CDC or the FDA, and he learned about the frequency, and he said he wanted to get it out in the communities before he let the cat out the bag. So he already knew that they can cause you to have a stroke, a heart attack. They can mess with your metabolism. All that's in there. Your bloodstream, give you diabetes, all of that. Have all those documents. But before I have to go, I want to say that because I'm gonna have to go in a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right. And Biden signed it into law. Right. And so yeah, and don't forget to look up the Havana Act 2021 by Biden. That should give you a lot of information too. They got their own documents out there. It's called Havana Act of 2021. Okay, I will. Thank you, Cornell. Appreciate it. Yes, that's what I need. I need all the support. I need all black people to know that this is happening to them. This is happening in our community. This is why our community is the way that they are. Why they don't want to give us bank loans, why they don't want to give our education. They like some people to be successful, like I said. Some people can graduate with a master's degree. Some people can graduate with lots of master's degrees in our community. Some people can be rich. We're no different than what the secretary said. They can make a lot of black Jeff Bezos, and they can also make a lot of rays. So you can be groomed to be rich and wealthy as black, and you can also die from it. Any more questions before I have to go?
Okay. Well, I just want to thank you very much. I thank you very much for bringing the topic because it's really very important. Because I'm going to tell my people, I'm going to answer the next one a lot about things. People get out of TV, they don't. So I appreciate you for coming forward with this because
You're welcome.
you know what people, man.
Yes.
It's like they put people in prison because they're not doing crime and they got to stay in there for 30 and 40 years. That's the whole honesty, though, too.
Yep, it sure is. The crimes they didn't commit. Well, thank y'all so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Look, we're still recording. I want to say thank you to
Promise to
Angela for
share your
having me on.
story
Thank you, Shanette.
with your
Thank you,
brothers and
Cornell.
sisters.
I really appreciate all that you've done to allow me this platform to tell my story. It's not easy telling my story to people who that you don't know will believe you, but now that I know that people believe me because of the legal system as well as the government having documentations of what's happening to me, a true story. So thank you guys so much for having me tonight. And I want to say thank you.
She can't not hear you.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night. Have a good night. And thank you again for sharing your
Thank you,
story
Sammy.
with us.
Ain't neither one of them in there, so they gone. They gone? Okay.